The knock on my door came in the dead of night, the kind of knock that makes your heart skip, hard and fast. I had just settled into bed, the warmth of my blankets pulling me in when I heard it. 3 loud raps, almost rhythmic, like they were testing how far they could push me. It wasn't the police, no. It wasn't even a delivery driver with a package. It was them, the HOA officers, and they weren't here to chat. My palms went clammy as I moved toward the door, the sound of their footsteps crunching across the gravel driveway like a warning shot. I didn't need to open the door to know what they were after. I could feel it in my bones. But this time, things were different. This time, I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to apologize for standing my ground. When I pulled that door open and saw their angry faces glaring back at me, all I could muster was, my land, my rules. My name's Rachel, and for as long as I could remember, I've lived in the house my grandfather built. A small, quiet piece of land tucked away on the outskirts of town, nestled between towering oaks and a patch of thick woods that always smelled like damp earth after a rainstorm. I loved it here. It was peaceful, private, a place where you could breathe without hearing the city's endless hum. Growing up, this house was everything. My parents didn't have much, but they gave me this piece of earth, this home. My mom used to say that the house had a soul, that every inch of it carried memories, of laughter, of struggle, of dreams. I remember the creak of the old floorboards, the sound of my mom's voice calling me to dinner, and the scent of homemade apple pie wafting through the air. When my mom passed, I took over the house. My dad had passed when I was younger, and after years of working in a local office job, I was finally ready to take the reins. I thought I could make it my own, bring a new life into it, make it something even better. I planted flowers around the yard, started a small vegetable garden out back, and repainted the shutters. But despite my love for the place, something always felt like it was hovering in the background, a constant presence, a threat. It came in the form of the Homeowners Association, the HOA. From the moment I moved in, they had their eye on me. It wasn't just the usual, keep your lawn mowed type of rules. No, they were more insidious. The emails, the notices left in my mailbox, the constant surveillance, at least that's what it felt like. Their eyes were everywhere, scrutinizing everything I did. There was Mrs. Whitmore, the HOA president, a woman who seemed to have nothing better to do than inspect the homes of everyone in the neighborhood. Then there was Mr. Cole, the enforcer, who made sure everyone followed every single rule to the letter. My land, my rules, it didn't matter to them. I was just another target, just another person they could push around. The first warning came when I put up a privacy fence around my backyard. It wasn't even a tall fence, just something to keep the dogs in and the world out. It took a couple of weeks for Mrs. Whitmore to show up at my doorstep, looking like she had better things to do than worry about what I was doing with my property. You can't just build a fence without approval, she had said, tapping the paperwork in her hand, her voice sharp like the heels of her shoes on the concrete driveway. I thought it was within the guidelines, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Not this design, Rachel, not this height, she snapped back. We have rules here. You'll need to tear it down. That was the first taste of what was to come. But it didn't stop there. Over the next few months, I started getting more notices, some about the size of my mailbox, others about the color of the paint on the garage door. Each time I felt the weight of their demands bearing down on me. They weren't just enforcing rules, they were trying to control every little aspect of my life, of my home. And I fought back. Every time they told me I was doing something wrong, I pushed back harder. I tried to reason with them, but they were relentless. I called meetings, I raised my voice, and I fought for my rights. But no matter how hard I pushed, it was never enough. Every time I thought I had a win, they'd find another reason to come after me. But now, it was different. The first real confrontation happened on a late summer afternoon, one of those days when the sun seems to burn a little too hot and the air hangs thick with humidity. I was out in the garden, kneeling down to plant some lavender by the old oak tree, when I heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into my driveway. A deep rumble, like a storm rolling in. I stood up, dusting the dirt off my hands, already feeling the weight of it on my shoulders. I didn't need to look. I knew who it was. The unmistakable white SUV with the HOA logo plastered on the side pulled up slowly, almost as if it was savoring the moment, ready to make its next move. Mrs. Whitmore was the first to step out. Of course, she had the same pinched expression she always wore, like the world owed her something. Her oversized sunglasses perched on her nose like they were a badge of authority. Right behind her, Mr. Cole, tall, broad, and walking with the kind of purpose you get when you believe you can control everything around you. "Rachel," Mrs. Whitmore called out, her voice cutting through the still air. "You've been busy, haven't you?" I wiped my hands on my jeans and turned to face them, trying to keep the irritation from showing in my voice. "I'm just tending to my garden, Mrs. Whitmore." "Oh, I know, but we've had some complaints." Her lips twisted into that patronizing smile I knew all too well. "Neighbors aren't happy about the flowers. They say it's attracting too many bees. And that fence of yours," she paused, eyes flicking to the perfectly legal 3-foot-high fence that ran around the perimeter of the backyard, "isn't up to code. We'll need you to take it down." I felt my chest tighten. It was always something with them. Always some petty reason to make me feel small. "You've been to my house enough times already. I've followed the rules. You can't keep doing this." Her smile faded just a little, but it was enough to let me know she wasn't going to let it go. "The HOA's guidelines are very clear, Rachel, and you know the penalties for non-compliance." "You've already fined me twice for things that don't even make sense," I shot back, frustration bubbling up. "This is my property, my land. I'm not tearing down anything." Mr. Cole, standing behind her, crossed his arms. "Rachel, you need to understand," he said, his voice low, almost threatening. "The rules are in place for a reason. You're making waves here, and it's affecting the whole neighborhood. Why don't you go check with the neighbors who are actually causing trouble?" I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "Maybe you should worry more about the people who don't follow the rules instead of harassing me for things that don't matter." The tension between us thickened, the kind of silence that swells before something snaps. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes narrowed, but she didn't back down. "You think you can just ignore the rules, don't you? But that's not how it works. You don't get to make up your own rules, Rachel. That's not how any of this works." I stepped closer to her, feeling the heat of the sun on my neck. "You don't get to tell me what to do on my own property. If you have a problem with the fence or my garden, take it up with someone else. I'm not doing anything wrong." Mrs. Whitmore's smile returned, but it was colder this time, like she had just decided that the gloves were off. "Oh, I'll take care of it, all right. You just wait." I felt my blood boil, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of a response. Instead, I turned and walked back into the house, slamming the door behind me. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me through the window, but I refused to look back. I wasn't going to let them intimidate me. Not this time. That was the first real standoff, but it wouldn't be the last. The following weeks felt like a slow burn, each day bringing something new, another letter, another fine, another complaint. It wasn't even about the rules anymore. It was about power. They were trying to break me down, trying to make me feel small enough to give in, but I wasn't going to let them, not without a fight. And then, one morning, I woke up to the sound of a loud knocking on the door. I was already bracing myself. This wasn't just another warning. This was something else. I looked out the window. Mrs. Whitmore's SUV was parked at the end of the driveway, and right beside it was a tow truck. I froze. My heart sank to my stomach. I grabbed my jacket and ran outside before I could even think it through. The sun was barely up, casting long shadows across the yard, and there, standing in front of my gate, was Mr. Cole. His arms crossed like he had all the time in the world. "You can't tow my truck," I said, my voice shaking. "You can't do this." He looked at me with that same cold stare. "You've been warned, Rachel. Multiple times. This is the final straw." I took a step forward, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're not taking anything. This is my land, and you have no right—" "Actually," Mrs. Whitmore's voice cut in, sharp as ever, "we do. You've violated our rules too many times, and now it's time to pay the price." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. My truck. My home. All of it was on the line, just because I refused to let them walk all over me. I didn't know what was going to happen next. But I knew one thing for sure. This was the last time they would try to take something from me. The tow truck's engine hummed in the background, its low growl sending waves of panic through me. I stepped closer to the gate, my heart pounding in my chest, the heat of the summer sun pressing down on my skin like it was trying to suffocate me. I could hear the sound of the truck's tires crunching on the gravel, a reminder that they were already halfway to taking what was mine. "Stop!" I managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. "You can't just take my truck. This is my property." Mr. Cole didn't even look at me. He was too focused on the tow driver, gesturing with his hand as if this was all just another day at work for him. Mrs. Whitmore stood a few feet behind him, watching me with that same calculating look she always had. It was as if she took some sick pleasure in seeing how far she could push me. I didn't know what else to say. I was running out of words, and then it hit me. This wasn't about a truck or a fence. This was about control, about power, and if I didn't stand my ground now, I was going to lose everything. I clenched my fists, the gravel beneath my feet crunching in response. "If you take that truck, I swear I'll fight this. I'll take you to court. I'll get every lawyer in this town after you." Mrs. Whitmore's eyes flickered, but she didn't flinch. She stepped forward, a slow, deliberate movement. "Rachel, you've made your choice," she said, her voice colder than I'd ever heard it before. "And now, we'll make ours." Without warning, she snapped her fingers at the tow truck driver. He immediately started the truck's engine and revved it, sending a loud, almost deafening roar through the still morning air. It felt like my body was vibrating with the force of it. I rushed to the gate, slamming my hand against the metal. "Stop! Stop now!" I screamed, desperation bleeding into my words. But the tow truck driver didn't stop. He just kept pulling my truck, inch by inch, toward the open road. I didn't know what I was doing anymore. My mind was racing, my thoughts jumbled. I felt a sickening mixture of anger and helplessness. All I could think about was the feeling of my truck being hauled away, my property slipping through my fingers, and how, no matter what I said or did, it seemed like I had no control over my own life anymore. "Please," I whispered, barely audible, "don't do this." But Mrs. Whitmore, who was still standing like a stone statue, didn't care. "You had your chance, Rachel. This is what happens when you don't follow the rules." She turned and started walking away, as if the situation was already over, as if she had already won. It was like a slap in the face. I wasn't just losing my truck. I was losing my fight. I was losing my voice. I had spent months battling them, trying to hold on to the little control I had left, and now it felt like all of it was slipping away. All the years of work, of sacrifice, of love I had put into this house, it all felt worthless in that moment. I stood there, watching the tow truck disappear down the road, taking my truck with it. The world felt surreal, like I was watching it from outside my own body. and all I could hear was the sound of the gravel crunching under the wheels, each turn of the tires marking a point of no return. But even as the truck disappeared, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to let this be the end, not like this. I had to do something. I had to fight. I spent the rest of that day in a daze, pacing around the house, my thoughts racing. The anger burned inside me, but so did the feeling of betrayal. My neighbors, the people I had once trusted, were all complicit in this. Every time they turned a blind eye to the HOA's rules, they were siding with the ones who were trying to crush me. I couldn't let them get away with this. I had to find a way to fight back. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through the numbers in my contacts, but no one was answering. Not my old friends, not even my family. It was like the whole world had turned its back on me. That's when I remembered something. A small group of people I had heard about, a group of homeowners who had dealt with the HOA's overreach in other parts of the city. They were fighting back, just like I was. And they had the resources to help. I called the number, my hands shaking as I waited for someone to pick up. When a voice finally answered, I wasted no time. "I need help," I said, barely able to get the words out. "They've taken my truck, and I'm next. They're going to come for everything. I need to stop them." The voice on the other end was calm, understanding. "You're not alone, Rachel. We'll help you. We'll fight them together." It was the first glimmer of hope I'd had all day, the first real chance to take back control. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and legal paperwork. I started gathering everything, the emails, the fines, the recorded conversations, anything that would show just how far the HOA had gone. The more I dug, the more I uncovered. They weren't just pushing me around, they were doing it to everyone. The entire neighborhood was under their thumb, controlled by fear and intimidation. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry, yes, but anger could be a weapon I was ready to use, and the more I learned, the more I realized that this wasn't just about me and my property. This was about a system that needed to be torn down, piece by piece. This was about taking back what was mine, and maybe even more than that. The night before the court hearing, I barely slept. My mind was a tornado, spinning with 1,000 different thoughts and fears. It wasn't just about the truck anymore. It wasn't just about the fence. It was about everything I had worked for, the home my grandfather built, the legacy my family left me, all of it on the line. I remember lying awake, staring at the ceiling, the ticking of the clock the only sound in the room. Every minute felt like an hour, every second stretching out in front of me like an endless abyss. I had prepared for this moment, studied the law, gathered the evidence, but nothing could prepare me for what was coming. Nothing could prepare me for the weight of what I was about to face. The morning arrived too soon. The sun had barely risen when I slipped into my best clothes, an old navy blue dress I had kept in the back of my closet for occasions like this. But it felt like a costume, something I was forced to wear to play a part I wasn't ready for. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the papers laid out in front of me, summons, fines, court documents. They all seemed like so much paperwork, so much bureaucracy that could swallow me whole. My hands were shaking as I traced the lines of text, wondering if any of this would actually matter. Would the court see it the way I saw it? Would they understand that this wasn't just a matter of broken rules, but a matter of dignity, of the very rights I had to protect my home? I grabbed my purse, the familiar weight of it grounding me, and headed for the door. The courthouse was just a few miles away, but it felt like an eternity getting there. I drove in silence, the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders. I was alone in this, completely alone. The people who I thought would support me were too scared to speak out, too afraid of what the HOA might do to them. So, I did this alone. It was my fight, my battle. As I walked into the courthouse, the heavy, cold air seemed to swallow me whole. I could hear the shuffle of shoes on the linoleum floor, the murmur of voices in the distance. And then, I saw them. Mrs. Whitmore and Mr. Cole were standing by the front doors, talking in hushed voices. The sight of them made my blood boil. They had the look of people who knew they were about to win, like they had already decided my fate. I took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of courage I had left, and walked toward the courtroom. The doors creaked as I pushed them open, stepping into the room where my entire future would be decided. The judge was a middle-aged man, calm and collected, his voice steady as he called the case to order. He glanced over at me, and then at the HOA's legal representative, a man I had never seen before, but who looked all too comfortable in his pressed suit. "Rachel Bryant versus the Homeowners Association," the judge announced. "Ms. Bryant, you may present your case." I stood up, my legs feeling like they were made of jelly, and walked to the front. The air in the courtroom felt thick, suffocating. My heart was pounding in my chest as I pulled out the stack of papers I had brought with me. I could feel their eyes on me, Mrs. Whitmore's cold gaze digging into my skin like knives. I began to speak, my voice shaking at first, but then it steadied as I started laying out the facts, the fines, the notices, the harassment. I talked about the fence and the garden, the truck, the constant pressure they had put on me. I could see the judge's brow furrow as I spoke, his attention never wavering. But I could also see the HOA's lawyer sneering, dismissing my words like they didn't matter. "These rules are here for a reason, Your Honor," the lawyer said, standing up, his voice dripping with condescension. "The defendant has repeatedly violated the HOA's guidelines. These aren't just suggestions, they're rules that everyone must follow, regardless of personal preference." My blood boiled at the sound of his voice. It was the same tone Mrs. Whitmore always used, the tone that made me feel like nothing more than a cog in their machine, a machine that didn't care about people, only about control. But I wasn't done yet. I had more to say. "Your Honor, these rules are being used to punish people for things that don't matter," I said, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. "They're using their power to control us, to strip us of our rights to our own property. I've done nothing wrong. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for respect." The room went quiet. For a brief moment, everything stopped. I could feel the weight of the words hanging in the air, my heart in my throat. I had said what I needed to say, but was it enough? The judge didn't respond immediately. Instead, he glanced over at the HOA's lawyer, who had taken his seat again, his face tight with frustration. The lawyer opened his mouth to respond, but the judge held up his hand, signaling for him to stop. "Enough," the judge said, his voice calm but firm. "I'll take both arguments into consideration." I sat down, my body trembling with adrenaline. My palms were sweating, my stomach tied in knots. The wait felt endless, but eventually the judge returned to the bench. He looked down at the papers in front of him, then back at us. "I've reviewed the evidence," he began, his voice steady. "And while I understand the concerns of the HOA, I also recognize that Ms. Bryant has a right to her property. This case isn't just about minor violations. This is about the abuse of power, and that I will not tolerate." My heart leapt in my chest. Was this really happening? Was this the moment everything was turning around? "I'm ruling in favor of Ms. Bryant. The HOA will cease all actions against her and will be required to pay damages for the wrongful fines and harassment she's endured." The room went dead silent. For a moment, I thought I was hearing things. The weight of the words crashed down on me like a wave. Victory. It felt so surreal, so hard to believe. But the feeling that hit me next was something I hadn't expected. Relief. A heavy, crushing relief, like I could finally breathe again. I had won. The courtroom was quiet as the gavel came down, the sound echoing in the hollow space. For a moment, I just sat there, motionless, trying to process what had just happened. My mind was still racing, a blur of disbelief and relief. The judge had ruled in my favor. He had seen through the HOA's tactics and called them out for what they were, a group of people using fear and control to impose their will. And I had won. But even in that moment of victory, something didn't feel right. I could feel the weight of the room pressing down on me, the eyes of Mrs. Whitmore and Mr. Cole boring into my back as I stood up. They didn't say a word. They didn't need to. I could feel their anger, their frustration, their disbelief. For them, this wasn't just a legal loss. It was a blow to their sense of power. As I walked out of the courthouse, the sun felt warmer than it had in days. I could feel its rays on my face, but it didn't ease the tightness in my chest. I had won, yes, but at what cost? The drive home was quiet. Too quiet. The weight of everything I had gone through, everything I had sacrificed, was starting to sink in. My victory felt hollow in the stillness of the car. What was I really fighting for? I had lost so much along the way. I had lost my peace, my sense of safety, my trust in the people around me. And for what? A legal win that would go down in history as just another case against an HOA? As I pulled into my driveway, the familiar sight of my house brought a strange sense of comfort. The flowers I'd planted were still there, the fence that had caused so much trouble still standing, proud and strong. But nothing felt the same anymore. The place that had once been a sanctuary, my grandfather's legacy, now felt like a battleground. I took a deep breath and walked up to the front door. But before I could even turn the knob, I saw it. The for sale sign across the street, in front of the house where the Hendersons used to live. They were good people, people I had known for years. They had kids the same age as mine. But now, they were gone. I didn't know where they'd gone or why, but I could guess. The HOA had pushed them out, just like they had pushed me. And it wasn't just me. It wasn't just my truck or my garden or my fence. It was the way they tore apart families, how they used their rules to make people feel like they didn't belong. And when I thought about it, I realized something. I had fought for myself. But I needed to fight for everyone. I wasn't done, not by a long shot. It took weeks before I could truly process what had happened. I spent my nights thinking, planning. The legal victory was only the beginning. I had to make sure that no one else would have to go through what I had been through. The HOA couldn't keep doing this to people. It wasn't just about enforcing rules, it was about exploiting fear, manipulating people, taking away their voice, their dignity, their property. I started reaching out to others, talking to neighbors, gathering evidence, organizing a group of people who had been affected by the HOA's overreach. There were more of us than I had realized. More people who had been too afraid to speak up, too afraid of retaliation, of losing their homes or their peace. Together, we formed a collective, and we started to fight back. We didn't just want to challenge the HOA in court, we wanted to change the system. We wanted to create a movement that would stand up to the kind of corruption we had seen. It wasn't easy. There were more legal battles, more sleepless nights, more pushing through walls of resistance. But with every small victory, we grew stronger. We learned how to use our voices, our stories, to push back. The more I spoke to others, the more I realized that this wasn't just about property rights. It was about reclaiming the power to live our lives without fear. It was about standing up for our families, our homes, our communities. And as I watched the change begin to take root, I knew I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for something bigger. A few months later, we organized a public meeting, a forum where homeowners could come together, voice their concerns, and learn how to stand up to the HOA. It was a small crowd at first, but as we began to speak, I could see the change in their faces. People who had been silent for years, afraid to challenge the system, were suddenly standing up, ready to fight. One of the first people to speak was Mrs. Henderson, the neighbor who had moved away. She stood in front of the group, holding a piece of paper in her hand. Her voice was shaking at first, but then it steadied. "I didn't know how to fight them," she said, her eyes locked on me. "But Rachel, you showed me that it's not just about rules, it's about standing up for your family. You gave me the courage to leave, and now I want to help others find that courage too." Tears filled my eyes as I watched her. It was a moment I would never forget. The fight wasn't just mine, it was everyone's. The battle wasn't over. It never truly is. But as I stood there, listening to the voices of my neighbors, hearing their stories, I realized that we had done something extraordinary. We had started a movement. We had shown people that they didn't have to back down. That no matter how small or insignificant they felt, their voices mattered. And in that moment, I realized something else too. This fight for justice, had transformed me. It had taken me from a woman who was afraid, who was alone, and turned me into someone who knew her worth, who knew how to fight, who wasn't afraid anymore. I had found my purpose in the struggle, and I would never be the same again. As I sit here now, looking out the window at the same flowers I planted so long ago, I know one thing for sure. This journey has changed me. I never imagined I'd be here, that I would have fought so hard and for so long, but I did. And through that fight, I've learned something that I didn't know I needed to learn. I've learned that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones you don't expect. They come out of nowhere, testing you, breaking you down. But it's in those moments, when you're pushed to the edge, that you realize just how strong you really are. You realize that you have more power than you think. And while I'm proud of what we've achieved, I also know that the fight isn't over. There will always be people who try to control others, to take away what's rightfully theirs. But now, I have the tools to fight back. I have the strength to stand up and say, no more. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Never let anyone take your voice. No matter how small or insignificant it may feel, your voice has power. And in the end, that's what makes all the difference. The journey has been long, but as I stand here, looking at the house my grandfather built, I know that every step I've taken has been worth it, because it wasn't just about reclaiming my property, it was about reclaiming my life,